The first thing people noticed about Elias Mercer was the smell. It followed him through the narrow streets of Blackwater Ridge long before anyone saw the wagon rolling over the frozen road. The smell was thick and sour, like wet earth dug up from an old grave after rain. Dogs whined and hid beneath porches when it drifted through town. Horses stamped nervously in their stalls. Even the smoke from the chimneys seemed to recoil from it. Blackwater Ridge was not a large settlement. In the winter of 1889 it held barely 200 souls, most of them trappers, miners, hunters, and hard-faced families who had settled too far north to leave once the snows came. The town sat between endless pine forests and a river that froze solid enough in January for wagons to cross. Men there were accustomed to death. They had seen wolves strip carcasses down to bone overnight. They had buried children during fever seasons. Fear was not a thing that came easily to them. But when Elias Mercer arrived, fear arrived with him. Sheriff Tom Hale was standing outside the trading post when the wagon entered town. He remembered the day clearly for the rest of his life. Snow drifted sideways through the gray afternoon. The wagon wheels groaned beneath thick ice. 3 horses pulled the load, but they looked nearly dead already, their ribs pressing through their skin. And behind Mercer's wagon was something else. At first Hale thought it was another horse dragging in the snow. Then he realized it was a sled. A long black sled, covered with hides. Mercer himself looked barely human. His beard hung in frozen clumps to the middle of his chest. Frost coated his eyelashes. One side of his face was badly scarred, as if something with claws had raked him open years before. He wore heavy furs stitched together from different animals, though none of Hale's experience allowed him to recognize every piece. Mercer stopped the wagon in front of the trading post and climbed down slowly. The smell became stronger. People nearby covered their noses. "Afternoon," Hale said. Mercer looked at him with pale eyes. For a moment Hale thought the man was blind. Then Mercer smiled. "No," Mercer said softly, "it isn't." Those words unsettled Hale more than he cared to admit. The trader running the post, old Bernard Pike, stepped outside nervously. Pike had traded in Pelts for 20 years and prided himself on knowing every valuable animal in North America. Mercer gestured toward the sled. "Got skins to sell." Pike licked his lips. "What kind?" Mercer's smile widened. "The rare kind." The gathered townsfolk watched as Mercer pulled back the tarp. Silence fell immediately. The pelts were unlike anything any of them had ever seen. At first glance they resembled wolf fur, but longer and softer, with strange silver streaks that shimmered faintly even beneath the weak daylight. Some patches were dark blue instead of gray. Others almost black. One of the hides looked disturbingly pale, nearly the color of human skin beneath moonlight. Pike reached out with trembling fingers. "Good Lord," he whispered. He touched one pelt and jerked his hand back instantly. It was warm. Warm despite the freezing weather. "Where'd you get these?" Hale asked. Mercer did not answer immediately. Instead he looked toward the tree line beyond town. "They were wandering," he finally said. The silence that followed felt heavier than the snow clouds above them. Pike forced a laugh. "Well, whatever they are, I've never seen anything like them." Mercer nodded slowly. "There's more where they came from." Hale noticed then that several of the pelts had marks beneath the fur. Scars. No, not scars. They looked more like symbols. Thin pale lines hidden beneath the hair. Almost carved into the skin itself. One of the townsfolk, a trapper named Joel Ritter, leaned closer. "What animal is this?" Mercer stared at him. The pale eyes seemed empty. "It used to have a name," he said. That night Blackwater Ridge could talk of nothing else. The women whispered behind closed doors while men gathered at the saloon arguing over what Mercer had trapped. Some claimed it was a species of northern wolf. Others thought the pelts came from Alaska or even Siberia. A few believed Mercer was lying entirely. But everyone agreed on one thing. There was something deeply wrong about those hides. Pike purchased 6 of them despite his unease. By midnight he regretted it. The first strange thing happened when his assistant, 17-year-old Caleb Moore, tried to store the pelts in the back room. Caleb later claimed the fur moved. Not from wind. Not from his imagination. He swore the hides twitched when he touched them. Pike slapped the boy for talking nonsense. Then he locked the pelts away himself. An hour later the screaming began. People rushed from their homes carrying lanterns and rifles. The noise came from the trading post. When Hale kicked the door open, he found Pike crawling across the floor weeping hysterically. The pelts were scattered around the room. One of them hung from the ceiling beam. No rope, no hook, just hanging there, as though invisible hands held it upright. Pike pointed at the fur with shaking fingers. It spoke, he whispered. Nobody believed him. Not fully. Yet nobody volunteered to touch the hanging hide either. Finally Hale grabbed a poker from the stove and knocked it down. The pelt collapsed onto the floor. Motionless. Normal. But Hale could not ignore what he had seen. The underside of the hide had looked disturbingly similar to flesh. Human flesh. Mercer stayed at the edge of town in an abandoned trapping cabin. He paid in silver coins older than any currency Hale recognized. The innkeeper refused him a room after seeing the pelts. Late that night Hale rode out to question him further. The forest surrounding the cabin was unnaturally quiet. No owls. No wolves. No wind. Only silence. Hale knocked once. Come in, Mercer called immediately. The sheriff stepped inside. The cabin was warmer than it should have been. A fire burned low in the hearth, yet the heat felt wrong somehow. Wet. Thick. Like breathing air inside a living body. Mercer sat sharpening a long skinning knife. More pelts covered the walls. Dozens of them. Hale tried not to stare. You mind telling me where you trapped those things? He asked. Mercer continued sharpening the blade. I didn't trap them. Then what? Mercer looked up. They followed me. Hale felt a chill despite the heat. You expect me to believe that? No. Mercer smiled faintly. But you'll understand eventually. Hale's hand rested near his revolver. What are they? The knife stopped moving. Mercer stared into the fire. There are places in the north where maps end, he said quietly. Places even the native tribes avoid. Forests older than memory. Lakes blacker than night. I found one of those places 3 winters ago. The fire crackled softly. I was hunting sable then. Good money in sable. I traveled farther north than anyone else. Thought I was clever. Mercer laughed bitterly. The snow began first. Then the sounds. What sounds? Hale asked. Mercer's eyes drifted toward the wall. Voices calling my name. Hale said nothing. Sometimes they sounded like my mother. Sometimes my wife. You got a wife? Had. Mercer resumed sharpening the knife. She died before I went north. The scraping of steel against stone filled the room. 3 weeks into the journey I found tracks. What kind? Mercer smiled. The wrong kind. Another silence. Then he leaned closer. They looked human at first. Bare feet in the snow. But they were too long. Too narrow. And every print had 6 toes. Hale felt the hairs on his neck rise. Mercer continued. I followed them because I was a fool. The tracks led me to a valley. The tracks led me to a valley hidden between cliffs. No animals. No birds. Just trees covered in white fur hanging from the branches. White fur. Mercer nodded slowly. Like cocoons. His voice became distant. And inside them were bodies. Hale's hand tightened on his revolver. Human. Mercer looked at him. What was left of them? Outside the cabin something moved through the snow. Crunch. 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 Hale turned sharply toward the window. Nothing stood there. Mercer did not react. They come closer every night, he said. What comes closer? Mercer's pale eyes met his. The owners of the pelts. Hale left soon afterward. He told himself the man was insane. He told himself isolation and frost had rotted Mercer's mind. But halfway back to town he noticed something beside the road. Footprints. Bare footprints. Long. Narrow. 6 toes. The next morning Caleb Moore vanished. His bed in the trading post was soaked with blood. The window stood open despite the freezing cold. Tracks led into the woods. Not boot prints. Bare footprints. 6 toes. Panic spread through Blackwater Ridge immediately. Men loaded rifles. Women locked doors. Children were dragged indoors before sunset. Sheriff Hale organized a search party before noon. 6 armed men followed the tracks deep into the forest. Snow swallowed sound around them. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No birds. No wind. Only the crunch of boots and distant whispering no one wanted to acknowledge. They found Caleb's coat hanging from a tree branch. Then his boots. Then strips of skin nailed to bark with sharpened bones. One of the hunters vomited into the snow. The tracks continued ahead. Hours later they reached a clearing. And there stood Caleb Moore. Or what remained of him. His body was upright against a pine tree. Arms stretched wide. Head tilted back toward the gray sky. His eyes were gone. So were his lips. The skin from his chest had been peeled away in perfect strips. But the worst thing was the fur. Soft silver fur had begun growing from the exposed flesh. Moving gently. Breathing. One of the hunters screamed. Another fired wildly into the woods. That was when the voices began. Whispers drifting through the trees. Soft at first. Then louder. Calling names. One voice sounded exactly like Hale's dead father. Tommy. The sheriff froze. The voice came from behind him. He turned slowly. At first he saw nothing. Then something moved between the trees. Tall. Too tall. Its body looked wrapped in pale fur, but beneath the hair Hale glimpsed human skin stretched tight across long limbs. Its arms nearly touched the ground. And its face. God help him, its face looked almost human. Almost. The eyes were too large. The mouth too wide. The thing smiled slowly, then vanished into the woods with impossible speed. The hunters fled immediately. One man never made it back. They found only his rifle later. Bent in half. After that, Blackwater Ridge stopped pretending everything was normal. Nobody stepped outside after sunset. Doors were barred, windows nailed shut, lanterns burned through the night. Still the whispers came. Sometimes scratching followed them. Sometimes footsteps circled houses until dawn. 3 more townsfolk disappeared before the week ended. Each time the same tracks appeared in the snow. 6 toes. Each time patches of silver fur were found nearby. By then everyone blamed Mercer openly. A mob gathered outside his cabin carrying rifles and torches. Hale arrived just before they broke the door down. Mercer opened it himself. He looked worse than before. Pale. Exhausted. The scarred side of his face twitched constantly. You brought them here, one man shouted. Mercer nodded. Yes. The crowd fell silent. You admit it. I warned you. Another man raised his rifle. What are those things? Mercer stared at the frightened faces surrounding him. They wear what they eat, he said quietly. Nobody understood. Mercer stepped aside. Come inside. Reluctantly they entered the cabin. The walls were covered with drawings. Dozens of them. Sketches of towering fur-covered creatures. Human bodies hanging from trees inside white cocoons. Strange symbols carved into skin. And one massive shape beneath dark northern skies. Hale stared at it in horror. The thing looked like a mountain made of flesh. Thousands of eyes covered its body. A giant mouth stretched across its center. What the hell is that? Hale whispered. Mercer looked toward the drawing. That's where they come from. Silence filled the cabin. Mercer sat beside the fire and rubbed trembling hands together. 3 winters ago I found its valley. The creatures serve it. Feed it. They skin travelers alive and wrap the bodies until they change. Change into what? Mercer looked up slowly. Them. Outside the cabin came a howl. Not wolf. Not human. Something horribly between both. Another answered from deeper in the forest. Then another. Then dozens. Mercer closed his eyes. They're here. The attack began shortly after sunset. The creatures emerged from the woods silently. No growling. No charging. Only pale shapes moving between the trees. People spotted them first near the church. Tall silver figures standing motionless in the snow, watching the town with wide unblinking eyes. Then the screaming started. Sheriff Hale fired his revolver until the chamber clicked empty. Bullets slowed the creatures but did not stop them. One leapt onto a rooftop with impossible speed. Another crawled beneath a wagon like a spider, its limbs bending the wrong way. Everywhere the whispers continued, voices mimicking loved ones, children, mothers, dead husbands. One creature approached a barricaded house using the voice of a crying little girl. Please let me in. The moment the door opened, everyone inside died. Hale saw the aftermath himself. Blood covered the walls. Skin hung from the ceiling beams like wet laundry. The bodies were gone. Mercer fought beside the townsfolk using firebombs made from lantern oil. Burn them, he shouted. Fire hurts them. The flames worked. Creatures struck by fire shrieked horribly. Not like animals. Like human beings burning alive. One collapsed near Hale. As the fur blackened and peeled away, he saw a woman's face beneath it. Alive. Her eyes rolled toward him. Help me, she whispered weakly. For one terrible second Hale hesitated. Then her jaw split open unnaturally wide. Rows of teeth unfolded from deep inside her throat. Mercer shot her through the skull instantly. They imitate suffering, he snapped. The battle raged for hours. By midnight half the town burned. The creatures finally retreated into the forest carrying bodies with them. 23 people were dead. Hale found Mercer sitting outside the ruined church afterward, staring north into the darkness. Snow drifted silently around him. They won't stop now, Mercer murmured. What do we do? Hale asked. Mercer's pale eyes never left the distant tree line. We kill the thing that birthed them. The remaining townsfolk argued until dawn. Some wanted to flee south immediately. Others believed Mercer was insane. But Hale knew escape would not matter. The creatures followed. And if they reached larger settlements, by sunrise a small group agreed to travel north with Mercer. Sheriff Hale, Joel Ritter, Preacher Samuel Green, 2 hardened trappers, and Mercer himself. 6 men against whatever waited beyond the forests. They left Blackwater Ridge beneath a blood-red sky. The farther north they traveled, the stranger the world became. Trees grew taller, snow deeper, the air colder than anything Hale had ever known. No animals crossed their path. No birds flew overhead. It felt as though nature itself avoided the region. Sometimes they found patches of silver fur hanging from branches. Sometimes footprints. Always 6 toes. At night the voices surrounded their camp. Mercer warned everyone never to answer them. Joel Ritter failed first. On the 4th night he heard his dead daughter crying somewhere beyond the firelight. Before anyone could stop him, he wandered into the trees carrying only a lantern. The screaming began minutes later. It ended quickly. They found his body hanging upside down from a branch the next morning. Skinned. The silver fur had already begun growing across his exposed flesh. Preacher Green nearly lost his mind after that. He spent hours muttering prayers and clutching his Bible with trembling hands. "The devil lives in these woods," he whispered repeatedly. Mercer shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "This place is older than the devil." 3 days later they reached the valley. Even Hale never forgot the sight. Black cliffs surrounded the land like giant teeth. Below them stretched a forest covered entirely in white fur. Not snow. Fur. Thick strands hanging from every branch like webs. And between the trees hung cocoons. Hundreds of them. Some contained bones. Others moved slowly inside. The smell was unbearable. Rotting meat mixed with wet animal musk and something sweet underneath, like flowers left beside a corpse too long. The preacher vomited immediately. Mercer loaded fresh ammunition into his rifle. "Stay close," he warned. They descended into the valley together. Silence ruled the place completely. No wind, no insects, only distant breathing, massive breathing. Hale heard it echoing through the cliffs. Slow, deep, wet. Then they found the lake. Black water stretched across the center of the valley like a wound in the earth. Something moved beneath the surface. Something enormous. The water bulged upward slowly. Shapes shifted below. Eyes. Hundreds of eyes opening beneath the dark water. Preacher Green dropped to his knees. "Merciful God." Mercer pointed toward caves near the shoreline. "That's where the creatures nest." As if hearing him, figures emerged from the darkness. Dozens of them. Tall fur-covered beings with pale human faces buried beneath layers of silver hair. They watched silently, waiting. One stepped forward. Hale's blood froze. The creature's face resembled Caleb more. Or what Caleb had become. Its lips stretched into a smile. "Cold," it whispered in Caleb's voice. Then all the creatures smiled together. Then all the creatures smiled together. The sound that followed was worse than any scream Hale had ever heard. Laughter. Soft, wet, human laughter echoing across the valley. The creatures began moving slowly down the shoreline toward them. Not rushing, not afraid, like they already knew the men were dead. Mercer lit another lantern soaked with oil. "Burn the cocoons," he ordered. "If they hatch completely, we're finished." The 2 trappers obeyed immediately. Flames spread through the hanging fur with frightening speed. The valley erupted in shrieks. The creatures attacked at once. One trapper disappeared beneath clawed limbs before he could even raise his rifle. His screaming lasted only seconds. The second fired wildly into the crowd until a silver figure leapt onto him and tore his jaw completely off. Blood sprayed across the snow in steaming arcs. Hale shot one creature directly through the face. It kept crawling toward him. Its shattered mouth twitched into a grin while black blood poured down its chest. "Cold," it whispered. Mercer hurled a firebomb into the creature's body. Flames exploded across the silver fur. The thing shrieked and collapsed thrashing in the snow. But more kept coming. Dozens. Crawling from the caves. Dropping from the trees. Some moved on all fours like wolves. Others walked upright with horrible jerking motions like broken puppets. Preacher Green swung a burning torch wildly while screaming scripture into the darkness. Then the lake moved. Not the water. The entire lake. The black surface bulged upward as something enormous began rising from beneath it. Hale froze instantly. At first his mind could not understand what he was seeing. Flesh. An impossible amount of flesh. A mountain-sized mass covered in wet silver fur and blinking human eyes. Half-formed faces pushed outward beneath translucent skin, opening mouths silently before sinking back inside the thing's body. Long human arms protruded from its sides, dozens of them, clawing weakly at the air. And at the center of the creature slowly opened a mouth large enough to swallow houses whole. Inside were bones. Thousands upon thousands of bones. Human, animal, ancient. The breathing sound became deafening. Every inhale shook the valley floor beneath Hale's boots. Preacher Green dropped his torch and began sobbing uncontrollably. Mercer stared at the giant thing with pure hatred burning in his pale eyes. That's it, he whispered. That's the mother. The enormous mouth opened wider. Voices poured from inside it. Hundreds of voices layered together. Children crying, women screaming, men begging for mercy. And beneath them all came another voice. Elias Mercer's wife. Honey. Mercer trembled violently. For the first time Hale saw fear break through the fur trader's hard expression. The voice continued softly from the darkness inside the creature's throat. Come home. Mercer took one slow step toward the lake. Then another. Hale grabbed his shoulder. Don't listen to it. Mercer's eyes looked distant. Empty. She's still alive, he whispered. No, she isn't. The giant creature shifted again. Faces pushed outward beneath its skin, screaming silently. One of them looked exactly like Caleb Moore. Another resembled Joel Ritter. The thing was wearing the dead. Mercer suddenly screamed in rage and hurled his lantern directly into the monster's open mouth. Flames burst across the black water. The creature shrieked. The sound shattered trees along the valley walls. Snow rained down from the cliffs in massive waves. Every silver creature in the valley collapsed screaming beside it. It can die, Mercer shouted wildly. Then something grabbed him from behind. A tall fur-covered creature drove its claws through Mercer's stomach and lifted him into the air. Blood poured into the snow. Hale fired twice into the thing's skull. The creature collapsed, dropping Mercer hard onto the frozen ground. The trader looked up weakly. Blood bubbled from his lips. Burn. All of it. The mother creature writhed violently inside the lake. More silver figures poured from the caves now. Hundreds of them. Preacher Green ran screaming into the forest and vanished into the storm. Hale realized they were losing. There were too many. Then he saw the barrels. Old oil barrels stacked beside the caves. Mercer must have brought them for this exact reason. The sheriff grabbed a torch and sprinted through the chaos. Creatures lunged toward him from every direction. One slashed his shoulder open. Another nearly dragged him to the ground. But Hale reached the barrels. He kicked them downhill toward the lake. The mother creature opened its giant mouth again, voices pouring from inside it like a hurricane of human suffering. Hale fired his revolver. The first barrel exploded. Then the second. Then all of them. Fire engulfed the shoreline instantly. The black lake erupted into towering flames. The mother screamed louder than thunder. Its massive body convulsed beneath the burning oil while countless eyes burst across its flesh like rotting fruit. All around the valley the silver creatures began dying with it. Some tore at their own skin. Others collapsed twitching in the snow. The cliffs started breaking apart. Huge chunks of rock thundered down around them. The valley was collapsing. Mercer laughed weakly through blood-soaked teeth. Told you, he whispered. Fireworks. Another quake shook the ground. Hale grabbed Mercer beneath the shoulders and tried dragging him away. But Mercer stopped him. No, hurry, Hale shouted. The fur trader looked toward the burning lake one final time. They followed me once, he said softly. They'll follow me again. Before Hale could stop him, Mercer shoved him backward and staggered toward the collapsing shoreline alone. Silver creatures swarmed around Mercer as if obeying him. Then the ground beneath the lake split open completely. Fire and darkness swallowed everything. Mercer vanished into the collapsing abyss together with the screaming mother creature. The last thing Hale saw before escaping the valley was Mercer standing inside the flames smiling calmly while thousands of voices screamed around him. Then the cliffs came down. Stone crashed through the burning forest. Trees snapped like bones. The earth split open beneath Hale's feet as he ran blindly through smoke and snow. Behind him the valley screamed. Not one voice. Thousands. Human voices mixed together in endless agony. The sound followed him through the collapsing pass long after the flames disappeared behind the mountains. Hale did not remember how he escaped. Only fragments remained in his mind afterward. Falling into snowdrifts. Blood freezing on his coat. Whispers moving through the dark trees beside him. Sometimes he saw silver figures keeping pace between the forest trunks. Watching. Waiting. But they never attacked. By the time he reached Blackwater Ridge 6 days later, he was half dead from exposure. The remaining townsfolk barely recognized him. His beard had turned nearly white. Deep claw marks covered his shoulder and chest. And his eyes looked older somehow. Much older. The first thing Hale asked after waking was simple. Did anyone follow me? Nobody answered immediately. Then old Bernard Pike spoke quietly from beside the bed. Sheriff. He pointed toward the window. Fresh tracks stood outside in the snow. Bare footprints. 6 toes. Hale said nothing after that. Winter tightened around Blackwater Ridge like a noose. The attacks stopped, but fear never left. Every night people heard whispers drifting through town after sunset. Sometimes the voices came from chimneys. Sometimes beneath floorboards. Sometimes directly outside bedroom windows. A few residents disappeared during the following months. Not many. Just enough to remind everyone the nightmare was not over. Then the dreams began. Hale suffered them first. He dreamed of the Black Lake every night. In the dreams the fire never destroyed the mother. It simply waited beneath the water watching him with thousands of blinking eyes. And always, standing beside the lake, was Elias Mercer. Unburned. Smiling. Calling Hale closer. Still hungry, Mercer would whisper. Hale stopped sleeping after a while. He spent most nights drinking alone in his office with lanterns burning around him until dawn. One stormy evening he finally descended into the jail cellar carrying a shovel and lantern oil. Hidden beneath chained blankets lay the final pelt he had brought back from the valley. The only thing recovered after the battle. Hale intended to destroy it once and for all. But the moment he uncovered the chains, he froze. The pelt was moving, slowly, breathing. The silver fur rippled gently like the chest of a sleeping animal. And beneath the hide something pushed outward from inside. A human hand shape, pressing against the skin. Hale stumbled backward in horror. Then the whispering started, not from outside, from the pelt itself. Tommy, his dead father's voice. Soft and weak. Please help me. Hale's hands trembled violently. The voice sounded real, too real. Then another voice joined it. Mercer's wife. Then Caleb Moore. Then dozens more. All begging, crying, whispering beneath the fur. The sheriff poured lantern oil over the pelt immediately. The voices became desperate. Don't. Hale struck a match. The fire exploded across the silver fur. The screaming that followed nearly drove him insane. Human screaming. Not creature screams. Human. The pelt writhed violently while burning. Shapes twisted beneath it desperately trying to escape. Then, just before the flames consumed everything, Hale heard one final whisper clearly rise from the fire. You fed it. The cellar went silent. The pelt turned black and still. Hale never entered the cellar again. Years passed slowly after that. Blackwater Ridge began dying. Families moved south. The mines closed. The church rotted beneath heavy snowstorms. People avoided speaking about the valley entirely. But the forest never forgot. Hunters still vanished occasionally. Silver fur still appeared hanging from branches after blizzards. And every few winters travelers reported seeing strange lights moving far north beyond the mountains. Some claimed they heard singing in the woods at night. Others described human figures standing silently beside frozen rivers watching them pass. In 1903 Sheriff Tom Hale died alone in his office. The doctor claimed heart failure. But the men who prepared the body noticed something horrifying beneath his shirt. Soft silver fur had begun growing across his ribs. The jail cellar was found open afterward. Empty chains lay broken across the floor. And leading away through the dust were fresh footprints. Bare, long, 6 toes. After Hale's death Blackwater Ridge collapsed completely. By 1910 only a handful of stubborn families remained in town. Then children started disappearing. One vanished from inside a locked bedroom during a snowstorm. Another disappeared while walking home before sunset. Each time the same tracks appeared nearby. 6 toes. People abandoned the town soon afterward. Most buildings were left exactly as they stood. Plates remained on tables. Clothes hung beside cold fireplaces. It looked less like a town abandoned, and more like one evacuated from a plague. Soon the forest reclaimed everything. Roads vanished beneath snow and weeds. Roofs collapsed. Trees swallowed homes whole. But stories continued spreading across the north. Stories about warm silver pelts. About creatures with human faces. About a scarred fur trader wandering frozen roads beneath moonlight. Some swore Elias Mercer was still alive. Never aging. Never changing. Always traveling farther north with his black sled full of hides. Most people laughed at those stories. Until winter came. Because every few years someone disappeared near the old forests. Trappers. Hunters. Entire expeditions. And the few remains ever recovered always looked the same. Skin missing. Silver fur nearby. 6-toed tracks in the snow. Then, during the winter of 1932, an expedition searching for lost prospectors discovered an abandoned campsite deep in the northern wilderness. The tents were shredded from the inside. No bodies remained, only piles of neatly folded human skin arranged around the dead campfire. One journal was recovered from the site. Its final unfinished sentence read, "The man in the furs says they are hungry ag." The writing stopped abruptly there. No trace of the expedition was ever found again. For decades afterward, the story faded into legend. Parents used it to frighten children during harsh winters. Hunters whispered about it beside campfires after too much whiskey. Most believed Blackwater Ridge had become nothing more than another ghost story buried beneath snow and time. But the North remembered. The North always remembered. In 1951, a railway crew reported seeing figures walking beside the tracks during a blizzard near the old mountain routes. Tall, pale figures covered in silver fur. At first, the workers assumed they were starving travelers. Then one of the things turned toward the train lights. Its face had no eyes. Only smooth skin stretched tightly across bone. Yet it still smiled. The crew refused to continue north after that night. 3 men quit immediately. One disappeared before sunrise. Only his boots were found beside the tracks. In 1968, a bush pilot named Warren Kelly flew supplies across isolated northern settlements. Experienced pilots considered him fearless. He flew through storms others avoided entirely. Then he crossed above the mountains north of Blackwater Ridge. His final radio transmission lasted less than 20 seconds. At first, air traffic control heard only static. Then Warren's voice returned sounding shaky and confused. There's a valley down there." More static followed. Then breathing. Heavy breathing. Wet breathing. "My God," Warren whispered. "What are those things waving at me?" The transmission ended with screaming. Search teams never found the plane. No wreckage. No bodies. Nothing. As though the aircraft had vanished from existence. Years later, one of the rescue workers admitted something strange. While searching near the mountains, his team discovered fresh footprints in untouched snow. Bare footprints. 6 toes. In 1984, 2 teenagers disappeared while camping near the ruins of Blackwater Ridge. Daniel Voss and Emily Carter. Their families believed they had simply gotten lost during a snowstorm. Then searchers recovered their camcorder beneath the ice near an abandoned church. Most of the tape was damaged. But several seconds survived. The footage showed dark trees at night illuminated by flashlight beams. Heavy breathing shook the camera. Emily could be heard crying somewhere off-screen. Then whispering drifted through the woods. Dozens of overlapping voices. Calling names. Laughing softly. The flashlight beam moved suddenly toward the trees. A tall silver figure stepped into view. Its face resembled Emily. Not perfectly. Like someone trying to recreate her from memory. The thing smiled directly into the camera. Then the tape ended in violent static. Authorities declared the footage fake. The bodies were never recovered. By the late 1990s, almost no maps still marked Blackwater Ridge. The roads leading there vanished beneath forests and ice. Most travelers never realized the settlement had existed at all. Still, stories persisted among truckers and hunters crossing remote northern routes. Stories about seeing lantern lights moving through storms where no roads existed. About hearing voices calling from empty woods. About finding warm silver fur caught on broken branches. And always the same warning followed those stories. Never answer the voices. Never follow the tracks. And if you ever meet a scarred fur trader offering pelts for sale, run. In the winter of 2007, a documentary filmmaker named Lucas Grady became obsessed with the legend of Blackwater Ridge after hearing rumors from local hunters. Unlike others before him, Lucas believed there was truth hidden beneath the stories. So he assembled a small crew and traveled north to document the abandoned settlement. 5 people entered the forest. Lucas, a cameraman named Eric, sound technician Maria Lopez, brothers Dean and Kyle Mercer. No relation to Elias Mercer. At least they thought so. The deeper they traveled into the wilderness, the stranger things became. Compasses stopped working correctly. Animals disappeared completely. Even the snow looked wrong somehow. Gray instead of white. Maria complained constantly about hearing whispering through her headphones. At first, the others assumed radio interference caused it. Then Eric reviewed the audio recordings one night. There were voices hidden beneath the static. Hundreds of them, repeating the same phrase over and over. Still hungry. Still hungry. Still hungry. Nobody slept after that. On the 3rd day they found Blackwater Ridge. Or what remained of it. The forest had nearly consumed the entire settlement. Trees burst through rooftops. Snow filled abandoned homes waist deep. The church stood collapsed beside the frozen road like a rotting corpse. But the strangest thing was the silence. No wind. No birds. Nothing. Lucas filmed everything excitedly while the others unpacked equipment inside the old trading post. That night Eric disappeared. One moment he stood beside the fire. The next he was gone. No scream. No struggle. Only the back door swinging slowly open into darkness. The crew searched desperately with flashlights. Then Kyle found the footprints outside town. Bare footprints. 6 toes. Maria wanted to leave immediately. Lucas refused. We finally found proof, he said. That decision doomed them all. Around midnight the whispering returned. This time everyone heard it clearly. Voices moving between buildings. Calling names softly. Dean swore he heard his dead mother speaking somewhere near the church ruins. Maria heard her younger sister. Lucas heard nothing at first. Then he heard Eric screaming deep in the woods. The filmmaker grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the sound despite the others shouting after him. He found the church minutes later. The old wooden doors stood open. Inside, moonlight illuminated dozens of silver pelts hanging from the ceiling beams. Warm. Breathing. Lucas slowly raised his camera. Then one of the pelts opened its eyes. Human eyes. The filmmaker stumbled backward in horror. The hanging skins began moving all around him. Whispering. Begging. Crying. One voice sounded exactly like Eric. Help me. Lucas turned toward the altar. Someone stood there watching him. A tall man wrapped in old furs. Scarred face. Pale eyes. Elias Mercer. Impossible. The fur trader looked unchanged despite more than a century having passed. You shouldn't have come back, Mercer said softly. Lucas tried speaking but no words emerged. Mercer stepped closer into the moonlight. The scar across his face looked fresh. Wet. Almost moving beneath the skin. They're waking again, he whispered. Then the church doors slammed shut behind Lucas. The whispering outside became screaming. And somewhere far beyond the ruins, deep beneath endless northern ice, something enormous opened thousands of eyes in the dark once more. Lucas backed away slowly, clutching the camera so tightly his fingers hurt. The hanging pelts swayed gently above him. Not from wind, from breathing. Mercer stood perfectly still near the altar, his pale eyes reflecting moonlight like frozen glass. You're dead, Lucas whispered. Mercer smiled faintly. That stopped mattering a long time ago. Outside the church something scratched against the wooden walls. Slowly, patiently, Lucas heard Maria screaming somewhere in the town. Then gunshots echoed through the night. Mercer closed his eyes briefly. They found your friends. Lucas raised the camera toward him instinctively. The red recording light flickered weakly in the darkness. What are those things? He demanded. Mercer looked upward toward the breathing pelts hanging above them. They're what's left. Left of what? Us. The scratching outside became heavier. Something massive dragged itself around the church walls. Mercer stepped closer. When the mother feeds long enough, the skin remembers being human. Lucas stared at him in horror. You're one of them. Mercer nodded slowly. Part of me. Before Lucas could react, the church doors exploded inward. Snow burst across the floor as silver figures poured into the building. Dozens of them. Tall creatures covered in pale fur and stitched human skin. Their limbs bent unnaturally as they crawled over pews and walls like insects. Lucas screamed and fired his revolver wildly. One creature collapsed. Another kept advancing despite half its face missing. Mercer did not move. The creatures ignored him completely. Instead all their eyes fixed on Lucas. Hungry eyes. Human eyes trapped inside animal faces. Then one creature stepped forward from the others. Lucas froze instantly. The thing wore Eric's face. Or something made from it. The cameraman's skin hung loose beneath silver fur while his mouth stretched into a terrible grin. Lucas, it whispered softly. Its voice sounded wet and broken. Cold. Lucas stumbled backward toward the altar. Mercer suddenly grabbed his arm hard enough to bruise. Listen carefully, the fur trader hissed. If the mother wakes completely, it spreads south. What does that mean? Lucas shouted. Mercer pointed toward the floorboards beneath the church. A deep rumbling had begun underneath them. The entire building trembled gently. Dust drifted from the ceiling beams. Then came the breathing. Deep. Wet. Massive. Directly beneath the church. Lucas felt terror crush the air from his lungs. No, he whispered. Mercer's expression darkened. The valley never died. The floorboards split apart suddenly. Black roots burst upward through the wood like veins. Only they were not roots. They were strands of silver fur. Thick. Wet. Moving. The creatures around the church immediately dropped to their knees. Worshipping. The breathing below grew louder. Lucas heard voices rising with it now. Hundreds of voices whispering together beneath the floor. Still hungry. Still hungry. Still hungry. Mercer pulled a rusted lantern from beneath his coat and shoved it into Lucas's hands. You have to burn the heart. The what? But Mercer was no longer looking at him. He stared toward the cracked floor with something almost like sadness in his pale eyes. I tried to kill it, he whispered. But fire only put it to sleep. The church floor exploded upward. A massive limb erupted from beneath the earth. Human arms fused together beneath slick silver fur. Fingers clawed wildly at the air while dozens of eyes blinked open across the flesh. The ceiling cracked from the force. Outside the town, every whisper suddenly stopped. Silence swallowed Blackwater Ridge whole. Then came the scream. The mother's scream. So loud the church windows shattered instantly. Lucas fell to his knees covering his ears. Blood trickled from his nose. The creatures shrieked in joy around him. More limbs burst through the floorboards. More eyes. More mouths opening beneath the fur. The church was becoming part of it. The entire town was becoming part of it. Mercer grabbed Lucas by the collar and dragged him toward the back door. Run to the mine tunnels, he shouted. The heart is below the mountain. What about the others? Mercer's silence answered everything. Outside, Blackwater Ridge had transformed completely. Silver fur covered the buildings like mold. The streets writhed beneath moving flesh. Figures walked through the storm wearing pieces of human faces stitched into their bodies. Lucas spotted Maria hanging from a lamppost wrapped inside a white cocoon. Her eyes moved weakly beneath layers of fur. Still alive, Dean Mercer fired a shotgun from the saloon rooftop while creatures swarmed below him like ants. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. Then Lucas heard someone laughing nearby. A child's laugh. He turned slowly. Children stood at the far end of the street watching him. At least they looked like children. Their bodies were wrapped in silver fur and their smiles stretched too wide across their tiny faces. One of them tilted its head. Come play, it whispered. Lucas ran. Mercer followed beside him through the collapsing town while the mother's breathing shook the ground beneath every step. The old mine entrance waited beyond the ridge behind rusted fencing and snow-covered carts. Darkness poured from inside the tunnel like smoke. Mercer stopped at the entrance suddenly. His body trembled violently now. The silver fur beneath his collar was spreading across his neck. They're calling me back, he whispered weakly. Lucas stared in horror as Mercer's pale eyes began turning completely white. You're changing. Mercer gave a sad smile. I never stopped. The whispering returned from deep inside the mines. Thousands of voices layered together. Lucas heard his own voice among them. Then his mother's. Then Eric's. Come below. Mercer shoved the lantern into Lucas's chest harder. When you find the heart, he rasped, don't listen to the voices. Something moved behind them in the snow. Hundreds of silver figures emerging from the storm. Watching silently. Waiting. Mercer slowly turned toward them. For the first time fear crossed his face. They know your name now, he whispered. Then the creatures charged. Mercer fired first. The shotgun blast tore through the front line of creatures, shredding silver fur and spraying black blood across the snow. But more kept coming. Dozens. Hundreds. Crawling over each other through the blizzard with twitching limbs and hungry white eyes. Go. Mercer roared. Lucas hesitated only a second before running into the mine tunnel. Darkness swallowed him instantly. Behind him came gunshots. Screaming. Then Mercer's voice shouting something lost beneath the storm. The tunnel descended sharply underground. Old wooden beams groaned overhead while rusted rails vanished into blackness ahead. Lucas held the lantern high with shaking hands. The deeper he went, the warmer the mine became. Not natural warmth. Wet warmth. Like breathing air inside a living throat. The whispering followed him through the darkness. At first distant. Then closer. Voices speaking from inside the tunnel walls themselves. Lucas. He ignored them and kept moving. The tunnel widened suddenly into an enormous cavern. Lucas froze in horror. The walls were covered entirely in silver fur. Not attached to anything. Growing directly from the rock itself. Huge cocoons hung from the ceiling by thick strands like spider eggs. Some twitched gently. Others split open slowly, revealing glimpses of pale human faces beneath the fur. The smell nearly made him vomit. Rotting meat. Blood. Sweet decay. Then he saw the heart. At the center of the cavern pulsed a gigantic mass of flesh buried beneath layers of silver fur and black veins. It looked almost human. Almost. A massive beating organ larger than a house. Each pulse shook the cavern walls. Each beat released another wave of whispers. Still hungry. Still hungry. Still hungry. Lucas backed away slowly. Eyes opened across the surface of the heart. Hundreds of them. Blinking in unison. Then mouths formed beneath the fur. Human mouths. All speaking together. You came back. Lucas nearly dropped the lantern. The voices shifted suddenly. Now they sounded like his mother. Soft. Loving. You were always lonely, Lucas. The cavern darkened around him. The whispers became memories. His childhood home. His father's funeral. The years spent desperate to matter. The voices knew everything. Stay with us, they whispered gently. We can make you whole. Something moved behind him. Lucas turned sharply. Eric stood there smiling. Or what looked like Eric. Silver fur crawled beneath his skin while one side of his face sagged unnaturally. You left me, Eric whispered sadly. Lucas stumbled backward. You're not real. Eric tilted his head slowly. Aren't I? More figures emerged from the darkness around the cavern. Maria, Dean, Kyle, all smiling, all wrong. Their bodies twitched beneath layers of moving silver fur. We're together now, Maria whispered. The heart pulsed harder. The cavern walls breathed with it. Lucas realized the truth then. The mother was not creating monsters. It was absorbing people, wearing them, learning them, keeping fragments alive inside itself forever. Every victim still existed somewhere within the flesh. Aware, hungry, screaming. Lucas nearly lost his mind at the thought. Then he remembered the lantern. Fire. Mercer said fire worked. The creatures surrounding him seemed to realize his intention instantly. Their smiles vanished. The heart beat faster. The whispers became angry. No. Lucas hurled the lantern toward the massive organ. The glass shattered. Flames exploded across the fur-covered flesh. The cavern screamed. Not one scream. Thousands. The walls convulsed violently. Cocoons burst open overhead as burning silver creatures fell shrieking onto the cavern floor. The heart writhed beneath the flames while black blood flooded across the rocks. Lucas ran. Behind him the entire mine shook apart. Wooden supports snapped like bones. Rocks crashed from the ceiling. The screams became deafening. As Lucas reached the tunnel entrance, something grabbed his ankle. He looked down. A child-sized creature clung to his leg with tiny human hands hidden beneath silver fur. Its face resembled the little girl from the street outside. Tears streamed from its white eyes. Don't leave us alone, it whispered. Lucas kicked it away and sprinted into the snow. Blackwater Ridge was collapsing. Buildings split apart while silver fur spread across the streets like wildfire. The ground itself pulsed beneath layers of flesh. And standing in the center of town surrounded by creatures was Elias Mercer. Or what remained of him. The fur trader's body had changed completely. Silver fur covered half his face. Extra eyes blinked beneath his skin. His arms twisted unnaturally as if bones no longer fit correctly inside him. Yet he still stood holding the shotgun. Still fighting. Mercer saw Lucas emerge from the mine and smiled weakly. Did you burn it? He shouted. Lucas nodded. For the first time in over a century, relief crossed Mercer's face. Then the ground beneath the town split open. A colossal mouth erupted from beneath Blackwater Ridge itself. Rows of massive teeth unfolded through snow and broken buildings while black flesh rose beneath the streets. The mother had followed them. Only part of it burned below. The rest had spread upward through the town like roots. Thousands of eyes opened across houses, roads, trees, and walls. The entire town was alive. Mercer stared at the nightmare with hollow understanding. It learned, he whispered. The mother's voice rolled across the storm through countless mouths at once. Still, hungry, silver creatures flooded toward Lucas from every direction. Mercer stepped between them. Run south, he rasped. Don't stop. What about you? Lucas shouted. Mercer looked toward the giant mouth rising through the ruins. A sad smile crossed his changing face. I brought it here. The creatures hesitated around him as though waiting for permission. Mercer slowly lowered his shotgun into the snow. Then he walked toward the mother alone. The whispers became softer around him. Gentler. Like children welcoming someone home. Lucas watched in horror as the fur trader disappeared into the massive mouth beneath the town. The instant Mercer vanished inside, every creature in Blackwater Ridge screamed together. The sound split the night apart. Then the entire town collapsed inward. Snow, fire, flesh, darkness swallowing everything at once. Lucas ran south through the storm while the world behind him screamed like a dying god. Lucas ran until his lungs felt ready to burst. Snow lashed his face like knives while the mountain behind him collapsed into fire and darkness. Even miles away he could still hear the screaming echoing through the storm. Not fading, growing. By dawn he reached the old highway where his crew's supply truck waited abandoned beneath layers of snow. The engine barely started. Lucas drove south without stopping once. He did not sleep. Did not eat. Every time he closed his eyes he saw the mother's countless blinking eyes opening beneath the town. He reached the nearest city 3 days later half frozen and nearly insane. Authorities dismissed his story immediately. An avalanche, they claimed. Exposure. Delusion caused by trauma. The police searched for the missing crew for 2 weeks before abandoning the operation entirely. No bodies were ever recovered. Only Lucas returned from Blackwater Ridge. At least officially. Because something else came back with him. The nightmares started first. Every night Lucas dreamed of endless dark tunnels beneath the earth. Wet breathing echoed around him while unseen voices whispered through the walls. Still hungry. Still hungry. Still hungry. Then came the scratching. Soft noises inside his apartment walls after midnight. At first he blamed rats. Until he noticed the sounds moving. Following him from room to room. One night he pressed his ear against the bedroom wall. Something whispered back from inside it. Lucas. He moved apartments the next morning. The scratching followed him anyway. Weeks passed. Lucas stopped answering phone calls. Stopped speaking to friends. He locked every door and window before sunset and slept with lights burning in every room. Then he began noticing silver fur. Tiny strands at first. Caught in his bedsheets. Stuck inside sink drains. Wrapped around the shower faucet. He burned them whenever he found them. But they always returned. One evening Lucas discovered something horrifying inside his camera equipment. New footage. Hours of footage he never remembered filming. The video showed darkness underground. Heavy breathing. Then pale shapes moving through tunnels beneath weak lantern light. The camera eventually stopped before a wall of pulsating silver flesh. A face slowly pushed outward from the mass. Elias Mercer's face. His pale eyes stared directly into the camera. "You left hungry," he whispered. The footage ended there. Lucas smashed the camera immediately. That night someone knocked on his apartment door at exactly 2:13 a.m. 3 slow knocks. Lucas froze in bed. Then came a woman's voice from the hallway. Soft. Familiar. His mother. "Sweetheart. Open the door." Lucas began shaking violently. His mother had been dead for 12 years. The knocking came again. Lucas. He looked through the peephole slowly. The hallway was empty. But fresh wet footprints covered the carpet outside his apartment. Bare footprints. 6 toes. Lucas moved to another state after that. Then another. Then another. It never mattered. The whispers followed him everywhere. Sometimes he glimpsed figures watching him from crowds. Tall people wearing heavy coats even during summer. Pale eyes. Silent smiles. Other times he woke to find wet footprints beside his bed. Always 6 toes. He stopped sleeping entirely after the first year. Doctors diagnosed paranoia, trauma-induced psychosis, severe anxiety disorder. None of them understood, because none of them heard the breathing beneath the floors at night. Lucas finally decided to destroy all evidence connected to Blackwater Ridge. The tapes, the notes, the maps, everything. He rented a remote cabin deep in the forests of Montana and prepared a massive bonfire beside the lake. Snow fell heavily around him as he threw journals and videotapes into the flames one by one. For the first time in months, silence surrounded him. No whispers. No scratching. Lucas almost believed it was finally over. Then he noticed footprints around the cabin. Hundreds of them. Fresh in the snow. Bare footprints. 6 toes. The forest around the lake stood completely silent. No wind moved. No animals stirred. Then lantern lights appeared between the trees. One by one. Dozens of them. Moving slowly through the darkness toward the cabin. Shapes followed behind the lights. Tall silver figures. Lucas backed away from the fire, trembling violently. "No," he whispered. A familiar voice answered softly from the woods. "You can't burn hunger." Elias Mercer stepped into the firelight. Or something wearing him. The fur trader looked worse than ever now. Half his face had melted into silver flesh. Extra mouths opened briefly across his neck before sealing shut again. One eye blinked sideways like an insect. Yet he still smiled gently. "They followed you," Lucas whispered. Mercer nodded slowly. "They follow everyone eventually." The lantern lights surrounding the cabin grew closer. Lucas could finally see the figures holding them. People. Or pieces of people stitched together beneath silver fur. Some wore children's faces. Others looked decades old. All smiling. All whispering softly together. "Still hungry." Lucas grabbed a gasoline can beside the cabin. "If I burn everything, it spreads," Mercer interrupted quietly. Lucas froze. The fur trader looked genuinely sorrowful. "That's what I never understood until it was too late." The silver creatures circled closer around the clearing. The fire crackled weakly between them. Mercer looked toward the dark lake nearby. "It lives beneath places now," he whispered. "Roots under rivers. Under forests. Under towns." Lucas felt cold terror spread through his chest. "How far?" Mercer slowly smiled. Then every lantern in the forest went out at once. Darkness swallowed the clearing completely. The whispers stopped. For one terrible moment there was absolute silence. Then something enormous moved beneath the frozen lake. The ice cracked loudly. A massive shape shifted below the black water. Eyes began opening beneath the ice one after another. Hundreds of them. Watching. Lucas stumbled backward in horror. The frozen lake bulged upward slowly as if something colossal beneath it was rising toward the surface. Mercer stepped away from the firelight toward the darkness. "You should run now," he whispered softly. Lucas turned to flee. But more figures already stood behind him between the trees. Waiting silently. Children. Hunters. Women. Faces stolen from countless lives across countless years. All connected by silver fur spreading through the snow-like veins. The ice on the lake shattered completely behind him. Something enormous began climbing upward from the black water. Lucas never got a full look at it. His mind refused to understand the shape. Too large. Too wrong. He only remembered endless eyes opening in darkness and the sound of thousands of human voices breathing together. Then everything went black. 3 months later, hikers discovered the burned remains of Lucas Grady's cabin beside the lake. No body was ever found. Only his camera survived, partially melted beneath the ashes. Authorities recovered a few seconds of damaged footage from its memory card. The final recording showed a snowy forest at night. Lantern lights moving between trees. Heavy breathing. Then a pale face leaning close to the camera. A face covered in silver fur. Lucas Grady smiling with white empty eyes. The footage ended with one final whisper. "Still hungry."